Okay, what's up everybody? Today I'm going to be talking about Andor, the show in general. I did a review like a week ago about Season 2. I was a little bit late to the game getting to Season 1. I didn't end up making a review for that, but I'm here now with the full season review for Andor. This is probably going to be the last time I make a video dedicated to strictly Andor, but I guess we'll see because I love this show and I may go back on that at some point. So, Andor as a show. I have to say that there is no other experience in Star Wars like the one watching Andor, because Andor is such a different show than any other project in Star Wars. And I think that only is a good thing. There are no downsides to it being different. A lot of people don't like Andor though because it's so different. They say it doesn't feel like Star Wars. And my response to that, honestly, is that those people just don't understand Star Wars. And I know that's kind of like a harsh thing to say, but if you think Andor isn't Star Wars or it doesn't feel like Star Wars, it's because you're looking through Star Wars through the lens of how you were introduced to it or how you grew up with it. You're not just taking into consideration what Star Wars is and what it's become and what it represents. Andor is such a good show, not even to mention that it's a Star Wars show, just it's so good as a show in general that I struggle to find any real criticisms of it or any real problems I have with it. I think everything was so well done. The acting, superb. The costuming was great. The set design was great. Locations, they used a lot of real locations. They were all great. I think that on all levels, they just hit the nail on the head. And that's what kind of bothers me about listening to certain people talk about this show, because they seem to have problems with all these things that are objectively good. I've heard people say that the acting was bad. Ridiculous. I've had people say that the story was bad. Ridiculous. The writing is great. I just don't understand where people's problems with this show come in. And I say that in the sense that those problems that they have with the show and those critiques they have of the show are not valid in my mind, but I do know where they come from. There are a lot of people who don't like Andor because of what makes it good. They don't like good storytelling. They just want to be entertained. They want, the Jedi, the Force, those sort of big movie fights. They want to just be held by the hand the whole time. They don't enjoy that Andor touches on real topics or real serious issues that are relatable to what's happening in the world or what has happened in the world. They want Star Wars to be this escapism, which it never really has been, but they're not ready for that conversation. And Andor is the Star Wars project that gets the most real, that touches upon the most realistic scenarios and is relatable to things that a lot of people have experienced, if not all people. And so I just think that it's ridiculous to criticize it for being what it is. And I get that people want Star Wars to be full of whimsy and wonder and all these things, but the dark tone and the dark themes and the dark topics really speak to me in this show. It's something that I don't want in all Star Wars, but I love in Andor. I don't necessarily want all Star Wars to be dark or anything like that. I enjoy my whimsy and wonder-filled shows. I loved Skeleton Crew, and that's basically what that was. So I think that Star Wars can go both ways, and not all Star Wars projects are for everybody, but just to outright say it's bad or that these aspects or these things that are included are done poorly just because you don't like it, that's not a real critique to me. You have to say, this isn't for me, or I don't like this. You don't get to say that it's objectively bad because that makes you a liar. But there are people that criticize every Star Wars project. It's different groups of people who critique different things differently. And I think that the group that criticizes Andor heavily is just one that I don't like to pay much mind to. And part of it is my love for the show. I think that everything in this show was insanely well done. But I think that I feel validated in that because it is critically acclaimed. It is, beloved by people who actually enjoy TV and movies and what goes on behind them and the work that goes into them. You know, I think that a lot of people who criticize Andor are Star Wars fans, but they're not really TV movie fans. They're not fans of art. And I think that that shows with the things that they say. But enough about the people that don't like Andor, because I love Andor and I want to talk about the things that I love about it. I think that the story of Andor is one of the most compelling in all of Star Wars. I think that they took Cassian Andor, who I enjoyed in Rogue One, and turned him into a top Star Wars character. And now that's not to say he's one of my favorite Star Wars characters per se, but anyone who says that he is, I can't fault you for that. I think that you have good taste. And I think that Andor did that with characters that we didn't even know in Rogue One. The characters that were introduced in this show have become people's favorite Star Wars characters. And I think that's just a real credit to the writing, the storytelling, and just all that this show is and represents. I think that it was all done so well that I have no problem with people putting this show and these characters on a pedestal because I think it deserves it. This show does a great job of portraying many different things, one of them being the perspective of just your average rebel. This show does a great job of portraying many different things, one of the biggest ones being the perspective of your average rebel soldier. Now I know that Cassian Andor is the star of the show, this is his show, but he is not a main character in the sense of being one of the rebellion's leaders or blowing up the Death Star or being a Jedi or being a princess. You know, he's not that type of main character. He is the central character in this story, but he is at his core just a man, and I think that's something that's super well done. You get to see the perspective of someone who just comes from a world. He's just living his life. You know, he has some talents, but ultimately he's a nobody in the grand scheme of things, and you get to see him work his way up, and he never really gets to unattainable heights like blowing up the Death Star or becoming a Jedi or anything like that. While he is an important piece of the rebellion near the end of his life, he is still just a cog in the machine trying to make this rebellion work, trying to make it successful. And I really enjoy the relatability that Andor gives off, and even more so than him, you've got some of these side characters who are also extremely vulnerable, and these are characters that you don't know what their fate is going to be. So throughout the story in both season 1 and season 2, we see some of these characters that we really grow attached to fall victim to the Empire. Some of these characters are killed in the line of duty, so to speak, or doing what they think is right, or some of them are just straight up murdered. And so I think it's great having this extra human emotion, this extra attachment and relatability to all these characters who maybe only have a line or two throughout the whole show, but it just hits that much harder when something bad happens to them because these feel like real people. And I think you can also attribute that to the great acting that is done in this show, that even the side characters, even these day players who may have only been on set for a day or two, they all feel like real people. The immersion is really well done. I never felt like there was acting going on in this show at all. It just felt like real people or real characters. Another thing that I really enjoy about this season is the moral dilemmas that come into play. Because as we know, this show is the darkest Star Wars project we've had on screen. And so I think it's just great to have these moral questions and these moral dilemmas pop up in the show. For example, at the beginning of season 2, whenever Cassian has to kill the young Imperial trooper because he saw Bix's face, I think that the moral dilemma that they discuss there is really well done, because on the one hand you have Cassian saying he had to do it because he was an Imperial threat who saw your face, and he is right in saying that, and he's probably right to have killed that trooper, but I do also see where Bix is coming from with the not being able to just let it go because he was just a young man. And while I do think that Cassian was right, I think that Bix is also right. She shouldn't have to just shrug it off like it's nothing, because it should get to you. I think in real life we see that happen. People who defend themselves and have to kill somebody, I think that a lot of them struggle to just get over that image. It is something that will scar you and will change you. I just really love that we got a Star Wars project that didn't shy away from serious topics. I know a lot of people don't like having serious real-world discussions or real-world topics in Star Wars or in their media in general. A lot of people look to movies and TV shows as escapism. And in that respect, I guess I can understand why Andor might not be for you, but that just makes me love it all the more. I like that we bring up topics like that, moral conundrums. I like that we get to see people's reactions to them, or characters' reactions to them rather, and just I like to see their take on it. I personally really do love movies and TV for escapism. I like to be distracted from the real world and all of its problems from time to time at least. But I also think that movies and TV shows and things like that are art, and art has always had messages in it. It's always been topical. There have always been important things that have come from art and feed back into art. And so I think that a lot of people didn't, well, maybe not a lot of people, but some people didn't like that Andor had the sexual assault scene in season 2. But I think that things like that are important to display in art. I think it's an important conversation, and I don't have any issue with it. I think that it was well done from a creative standpoint, and I think that it's something that makes sense from a story standpoint. You have this regime that comes in and feels invincible, and you've got these people who aren't very high up the totem pole, but they're like middle management types who think that you can't do anything to them and they can just do whatever they want. And so it makes sense from a story standpoint that Imperial officers would be just high on their own power and they think there's no consequences for them. Star Wars from its conception has had themes of rebellion and overthrowing dictatorships and overthrowing regimes that want to take freedoms away from the people. And I do think that that is just expanded upon in Andor, and I just really enjoy that. I like the perspective of these topics from, just non-combatants, civilians and such, and I think that that's interesting to see how it affects communities in this show and how it affects different worlds. And I really enjoy seeing how all the characters are able to either adapt, some of them rise up against what is essentially fascism, and some of them fall victim to it. You see Cyril Karn, who's one of the better written villains in Star Wars, to be honest, because he is, at the end of the day, a villain, but there are times when he's just an antagonist. After all, he is just a man. He is also a cog in the machine, but he's not a cog in the machine for the rebellion. He's a cog in the machine for the Empire. And ultimately, you see him aspiring to be something, and he ends up just being used and cast aside because he didn't really know what he was getting himself into. And that's not to excuse anything that he did, but that's an interesting take on someone who did fuel the Imperial propaganda machine and fuel the Imperial agenda. And so I think that that's interesting. You've got these people who the Empire doesn't really care about, but they think that they really are well looked after by the Empire. You have people like Cyril, and Cyril's mother is another example of that. Someone who thinks the Empire can do no wrong because she's at the capital and she doesn't see what goes on. And you see that she doesn't really show much emotion at all until her son is killed. And so I think that that's interesting because we get not just these great heroes versus these great villains. You have lesser heroes against lesser villains, and you have people who are not either. You have people who are just people who support what's good and right in the galaxy, and you have people who support the Empire and what they're doing. And I think it's interesting to see this just side of Star Wars that's from the perspective of the citizen. And that really drew me in, this idea of seeing all these grand and terrible things going on from the perspective of someone who's just on the ground, so to speak. Because on the one hand, you've got these people who think that, what can we do? I'm just a man and the Empire is so vast. There's a massive navy, a massive army. I'm just an untrained person. And then you've got the other side that's, I'm just an untrained person, but I'm going to do everything I can because we the people can rise above this atrocity. We give them power so we can take it away. It's up to us to stand up. And I just love that about Andor. And on top of seeing this sort of grounded reality in Star Wars, this perspective of the citizen, we also get to see some other perspectives, like the perspective of Senator Mon Mothma, who is someone of prestige, someone of importance in the Imperial Senate. And yet, it still just feels like we're seeing it from the perspective of someone who is powerless to do anything. Because while she's doing all she can, we begin with her feeling like she's drowning in a way. Even with characters like Mon Mothma, who's a senator, and we've got Luthen, who has some wealth to his name, some notoriety to his name, and yet even with these characters, even with people inside the ISB like Lonnie, everyone just feels like they're fighting this uphill battle that cannot be won without just giving it everything we've got. As we know, Luthen doesn't think he's actually going to live to see these days renewed. He thinks he's going to die before the galaxy's freedom returns, and he is right, but he still fights on. He gives everything he's got. Everything he can do, he does. I enjoy that theme in Andor, this theme of fighting for those who can't, this theme of fighting for the future, even though we may not see it. I'm honestly so impressed still at how emotional Andor was. I think that Star Wars has had emotional moments before, but I think that things just hit that much harder in this series. For me personally, I'd say the three scenes in Star Wars, or the three moments in Star Wars that make me the most emotional, are in this show. I'd say that I Can't Swim from Season 1, Marva's speech at the end of Season 1, and the final call for help on Gorman at the end of that arc of Season 2. I would say that those three moments hit me on an emotional level more so than anything else in all of Star Wars. And that's again just a testament to how good the writing is, how good the direction is, how good the acting is. To avoid this being a 2-hour video, I'm not going to talk about things I like in terms of like ship designs and droid designs and planet designs and things like that, though I did enjoy all of those things. I just wanted to briefly touch on some of the things that Andor has contributed to Star Wars that just speak to how great it is. I think that Andor really took characters that people liked or maybe didn't really have much of an opinion about at all and turned them into fan favorites, like Mon Mothma, like Andor himself. You might have liked his character, but was he one of your favorites just based on Rogue One? I'd say that most people would probably say no. But I know that he's now in a lot of people's, top 10? Some might even put him in top 5. I don't know if he's in my top 10, but I still think they turned him from a good character to a great character. I think he was borderline great before, but it's hard to say really when you're sharing the screen with a whole group of characters in one movie. We were introduced to so many people in Rogue One. We didn't get a whole lot of focus on Cassian. He wasn't really the main character of Rogue One. I think, if anyone, it's Jyn. And so I think that this show just took him and made him a great character. Mon Mothma, did I just say Mon Mothma? If not, I'm circling back to Mon Mothma. Mon Mothma was in Star Wars since the OT, and yet now she's in people's top characters. Not everybody's, but I think it's valid to put her up there on this higher level, this higher plane than she was before. And in the same way, I think that Andor took new characters and turned them into really relatable, really great characters that people really enjoy. Luthen is up there for a lot of people. I know a lot of people like Clea. There are others as well. Heroes that you can root for and people that you wish you could see more of. And on the other side of that coin, Andor gave us some of Star Wars' best written villains. Cyril Karn is one of Star Wars' best written villains / antagonists. Dedra Meero is one of Star Wars' best written villains. One of Star Wars' best written characters, honestly. And you could even say that some of these characters from Andor are some of Star Wars in general's best written characters. Like I said before, the three most emotional moments in all of Star Wars for me come from Andor, and I know a lot of people can attest as well that for them, a lot of the most emotional moments in all of Star Wars come from Andor. And so I think that's something that Andor contributes to Star Wars as well. There's just this emotional aspect to it that you don't have in all Star Wars. And you also get this dark aspect that isn't in any other Star Wars, really. There's maybe a bit of it in Rogue One, but for the most part, a lot of this dark, serious storytelling is in Andor, and a lot of people love it for that, including me. And so that's something that Andor contributes to Star Wars. It's something that hasn't been done before. It's something that is new thematically. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Andor has received a lot of accolades. It's received a lot of recognition. I think it deserves it all. And then some. I think that this show is still underrated. There's a lot of people that will put this show on a pedestal. I will do it as well because it deserves to be there. But there's just so many people out there that won't give it a chance or just don't like it for, in my opinion, nonsense reasons. So I just think that it will always be one of Star Wars' best projects, and it will continue to be underrated because of the considerable amount of people that just downplay how good it is. As time continues to pass, my love for this show and my respect for this show just continues to grow, and that just has led me to this thought. The worst thing about Andor is that it was made. The best thing about Andor is also that it was made. I love this show so much, and it's so good that it's just kind of criminal that it was ever created in Star Wars, because now I'm going to hold Star Wars projects to this high standard. And I really shouldn't, because most, if not all, projects are not going to live up to this level of storytelling, this level of quality that we got in Andor. But I know that they're capable of making something like this. And that bothers me because everything that I don't like as much that comes out now, I'm going to have to appreciate in a different way. And I do still enjoy Star Wars projects that are very different from Andor. It doesn't have to be thematically like Andor, but I do think that overall the quality needs to be pretty close to Andor, because the greatness of Andor is not limited to its storytelling or its characters or anything like that. Everything in Andor was so well done from a creative standpoint, from a behind-the-scenes standpoint. Just good quality writing, good quality costumes, good set pieces, things like that. I need everything else in Star Wars now to kind of just live up to those things. It doesn't have to be like Andor, but I just want everything to feel like it had, thought put into it, heart put into it. I want to feel like the showrunner and the actors and everybody really cares and believes in the art they're creating. I really enjoyed Skeleton Crew. That is very different from Andor, but I still felt the quality in the production. And that's something that isn't in all Star Wars projects. So in that way, Andor kind of has ruined any Star Wars project that I think just wasn't well done from a creative standpoint or from a production standpoint. But at the same time, I enjoy this show for what it is so much that it's worth it. And it gives me hope that we can see this level of production in Star Wars again. Unfortunately, though, I think that we may have peaked with Andor. I don't know how long it's going to take to get something on this level again. As I wrap this video up, I want to leave you with this. This is something I've not told anyone. This is something I've never even said aloud. It's kind of controversial, but Andor is the best show that Star Wars has ever made. Furthermore, Andor is the third best project in all of Star Wars, and I will stand and die on that hill. And I will say, that doesn't necessarily mean that I enjoy watching Andor more than I enjoy watching my other favorite Star Wars projects, because one of the movies that I put in the top 3 Star Wars projects is not my favorite movie. It's not my second favorite movie. But being objective and thinking about the quality of the project, I think that Andor deserves to be top 3 in all of Star Wars. I really love Clone Wars. I really love Rebels. I would round out my top 3 shows in Star Wars with those 2 shows, with Clone Wars and Rebels. That doesn't mean I enjoy watching Andor all the time more than I enjoy watching Clone Wars. Sometimes it'll fluctuate. I enjoy Clone Wars more at this moment or Rebels more at this moment, but I think just from an objective standpoint, looking at it from a distance, I think that Andor is top 3 in all Star Wars. But yeah, that's all I've got to say about Andor for now. I did not want to make this a 2-hour video. It's already probably like 30 minutes, so I'm not going to talk about ship designs and droid designs and go into detail about every character. Maybe I will down the line at some point. I probably will now that I think about it, but for now, that's where I'm going to leave this, just so that this isn't a YouTube video marathon type of thing. So, what did you think about Andor? Am I glazing it too much, or do you think that it is also a top Star Wars project that deserves a lot of praise? Let me know in the comments down below. If you want to help me out here on YouTube, liking this video, commenting on this video, subscribing to the channel, or checking out some of my other videos, all those things help me grow the YouTube channel. Like I said, I did cover Season 2 like a week ago, and I've reviewed some other Star Wars projects, given my thoughts on them. So if you're interested in any of that, the link to that playlist will probably be in the end cards of this video. You know what? I'll put it there, you know, just to make it easy. But yeah, if you want to check me out anywhere else, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Twitch, I do some things over there. Those will be linked in the description of this video because that's how YouTube works now, I think. But yeah, until next time, bye.